These are 5 true encounters from drivers who are alone at night and learn that sometimes the road itself is the least of your worries. I was halfway home when I realized there was someone in my back seat, but the doors had been locked the entire time. I've worked the late shift for years. Driving home at 1 in the morning is second nature to me. Empty streets, green lights all the way, the occasional fox darting across the road. That night felt no different. The air was cool, and the streetlights cast that soft orange glow over everything. My car, an older sedan, had manual locks. I always checked them before I got in, tugging each handle out of habit. My route home was the same every night. 4 main turns, then a 10-minute stretch of road that felt like it cut through nothing. Halfway down that empty stretch, I glanced in my rearview mirror. At first, I thought I was just catching my own reflection in the low light, until my brain processed what I was seeing. It wasn't me. It was the faint outline of a man's face, barely visible in the dim glow from the dash. Pale skin, dark, sunken eyes. He was sitting directly behind me, angled slightly toward the passenger side. I whipped my head around so fast I nearly drifted off the road. Nothing. The back seat was empty. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. I told myself I'd been awake too long, that my eyes had played a trick on me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter and focused on the road. But a minute later, I looked again. The face was still there. This time, it was clearer. His head was tilted forward, and I could see more detail. The gaunt lines of his cheekbones, lips pressed into a thin, almost smile. I jerked my eyes forward, telling myself not to panic. Every part of me screamed to stop the car, but I couldn't bring myself to slow down. I took deep breaths, keeping my gaze locked on the road. I thought about calling someone, but my phone was in my bag on the passenger seat. Reaching for it meant looking away from the road and looking back at that mirror. When I finally forced myself to check again, my stomach dropped. He was closer. Not by much, but enough to see that his lips were slightly parted, like he was whispering something I couldn't hear. My foot pressed harder on the gas. The empty road blurred past, but no matter how fast I went, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was leaning in, closing the gap between us. I reached the final light before my neighborhood. It was red. My car slowed to a stop, the engine idling in the quiet. I refused to look in the mirror. I stared straight ahead, counting the seconds until the light changed. Then I heard it. A faint exhale, coming from right behind my ear. The light turned green. I shot through the intersection and didn't breathe until I pulled into my driveway. I left the engine running as I grabbed my bag and practically fell out of the car. The cold air hit me like a slap, but I didn't care. I ran to my front door, fumbling with the keys. Inside, I locked everything, deadbolt, chain, the works, and forced myself to peek out the window toward my car. It sat there in the driveway, engine still on, headlights cutting across the lawn. I could see the rearview mirror from where I stood. It was angled slightly down now, like someone had touched it. I called the police, stammering through the story. They came within minutes, searched the car, and found nothing. No signs of forced entry, no one hiding inside. The officer tried to be reassuring, chalking it up to exhaustion. But as he was leaving, he paused by the open driver door. He leaned in, then glanced back at me. "Do you usually keep your seatbelt twisted like this?" he asked. I stepped closer. The driver's side seatbelt was twisted once around itself, tight, like it had been gripped. There were faint, oily smudges on the fabric, long, finger-shaped marks. The officer didn't say anything else. He just adjusted the belt and shut the door. I haven't driven that stretch of road since, and when I get in my car now, I checked the back seat twice. Sometimes I checked 3 times. Because once you'd seen a face in your rear view that shouldn't be there, you never really stopped looking for it again.
The high beams were blinding, but when I finally pulled over, there was nothing behind me. Just silence. I never thought driving home late at night could feel so wrong. It started like any other night after classes. I was tired, but relieved it was Friday. The roads were mostly empty as I got onto the highway, a 2-lane stretch that cuts through miles of farmland and forest. The kind of place where the only thing you hear at night is the hum of your engine and the wind brushing past your windows. About 5 miles in, I noticed headlights behind me. At first, I thought it was just a car keeping pace, but then the lights hit my rearview mirror. They weren't normal headlights. They were huge and bright, like something from a truck, but bigger than anything I'd ever seen on the road. At first, I wasn't too worried. I figured the driver was just keeping their distance. But then the high beams kicked on, and suddenly they were blinding. I could barely see the road behind me without squinting or turning my head. I tapped my brakes lightly, hoping they'd back off. Instead, the truck stayed right behind me, following every turn, every lane change. It was like it was glued there, refusing to let me out of its sight. I tried to shake it off by speeding up a little, but the truck matched me mile for mile. Sometimes I'd slow down and it would slow too. Faster, slower, faster, slower. My heart started racing. I wanted to pull off the highway and get help, but the few exits in this part were all closed or deserted. I told myself I was imagining things, that maybe it was just some trucker making a long haul. But something about the way those headlights glared at me felt different. Menacing. Finally, about 20 miles down the road, I saw a small rest stop with a gas station. I decided to pull in. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the steering wheel as I took the exit ramp. The truck followed. I parked at the far end of the lot, hoping the distance would give me some peace. I sat in my car for a minute, heart pounding, staring through the rear window. But the truck was gone. Not just hidden, gone. I looked around the empty lot, the dark road leading back to the highway, the trees swaying quietly in the night breeze. Nothing. I stepped out, checking behind the gas station, around the parking lot, but no sign of the truck. My pulse was still hammering in my ears. That's when I noticed it. The silence. No engine idling, no distant rumble of tires on asphalt, nothing but the rustling leaves and my own ragged breathing. I locked my doors and called my mom, trying to keep my voice steady. I told her what happened, and she insisted I stay put until she could come get me. While I waited, I pulled out my phone to check the dash cam footage. I'd set it up a few weeks ago because of weird noises my car sometimes made, but I never really looked at it. I pressed play, expecting to see that truck stalking me down the highway. Nothing. The footage showed me driving alone. No headlights behind me, no massive truck blinding me with high beams, just my own car, the dark road stretching ahead under the dim streetlights. I rewound it, paused it, played it again. Still nothing. I felt cold, like the air had been sucked out of the room. The truck had been there. I had seen it with my own eyes, felt its presence in my rearview mirror, but the dash cam refused to prove it. When my mom arrived, I told her what I'd seen and what the camera showed. She squeezed my hand, telling me maybe it was some weird trick of light or my tired mind playing games. Maybe. But ever since that night, I've never been able to shake the feeling that something was watching me on that road. Something that doesn't want to be caught on camera. Every time I drive at night, I find myself glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting those massive high beams to appear again. But they never do. And maybe that's what scares me the most. Every time I passed a mile marker, they slowed down, then sped up just to catch me again. I work nights at a small hospital outside of town. It's a lonely stretch of highway between work and home, 40 miles of blacktop flanked by fields and tree lines. That night, the air was damp and heavy with fog, the kind that made the reflective mile markers glow like ghostly sentinels in my headlights. I noticed them somewhere around mile marker 212, a dark sedan in my rear view, keeping just enough distance to not be threatening at first. Their headlights weren't bright, but I could feel their presence like a hand pressing against my spine. I told myself it was nothing. Late-night drivers tend to stick together on empty roads. Safety in numbers, right? At mile marker 213, they slowed down. The gap widened until their headlights vanished completely. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. But the relief didn't last. 10 minutes later, right after passing mile marker 214, they were back, closer now, hugging my bumper. My hands tightened around the wheel. I sped up to 70, testing them. They matched me. I slowed to 60. They matched again. It was like they were tethered to me by an invisible rope. Every time a mile marker appeared on the right, they'd drop back, always disappearing just far enough to be swallowed by the fog. By mile marker 217, I'd stopped pretending it was nothing. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I grabbed my phone and hovered over 911, but I didn't press call. What would I even say? Someone's driving behind me weird? I decided to lose them. The highway stretched out flat in front of me, so I slammed my foot down, pushing the car past 80, then 85. The wind howled through the cracked window, and my tires hummed against the asphalt. In the mirror, the sedan shrank, swallowed by the fog once again. Mile marker 218 passed on my right. No headlights, no shadowy outline. I felt the tension drain from my shoulders. Maybe they'd turned off at a hidden road or gas station. I even laughed, shaky but real. Then, as I passed 219, they were back. No gradual approach, no distant headlights growing closer. One moment the road behind me was empty, and the next their headlights filled my rear view, so close I couldn't see the grille. That was the moment I called 911. My voice trembled as I told the dispatcher what was happening. She told me to keep driving toward the next exit about 6 miles ahead, where a patrol car would meet me. I kept my eyes glued to the road, too afraid to look back. The dispatcher stayed on the line, her voice calm and steady. Every time a mile marker appeared, I'd catch the faintest change in the light, the headlights behind me dimming, receding. Then, minutes later, they'd surge forward again, impossibly fast, like the car was leaping through the fog. At mile marker 224, I spotted flashing blue lights ahead. Relief flooded through me so suddenly I almost cried. I slowed to pull onto the shoulder, waving frantically at the officer. When I stopped, the patrol car pulled in behind me. The sedan should have been trapped between us, but when I turned to point, there was nothing. Just an empty strip of highway disappearing into the mist. The officer checked the dashcam footage from my car right there on the roadside. My stomach dropped as we watched it back. I was alone the entire time. No headlights, no tailing vehicle, nothing but me, mile markers, and the dark. I drove home with the officer following close behind. That night, I didn't sleep. And every morning since, when I drive that road to work, I make sure to count the mile markers, just to see if they're still out there, waiting for me to pass. The kid was sobbing on the shoulder until it stood up, and I realized it wasn't a kid at all. It was past midnight when I saw it, a tiny shape crouched on the gravel shoulder of a back road I'd driven 100 times. My headlights caught the outline of small shoulders shaking, a pale face buried in hands. My first thought was that it was a lost kid, maybe a runaway or someone who'd fallen out of a car. The crying was faint but steady, carried just enough by the cold night air for me to hear over my idling engine. I slowed, pulling over a few feet ahead, hazard lights clicking in the empty dark. The road was dead silent, no other headlights for miles. I grabbed my phone and flashlight before stepping out, the chill instantly cutting through my jacket. "Hey, you okay?" I called, taking a cautious step forward. No answer, just the quiet, broken sobbing. The figure was small, maybe 3 feet tall, hunched low. Their clothes looked wrong, not like a modern kid's hoodie or jeans. The fabric was baggy, too long in the sleeves and pale like it had been bleached. I shined my light on the ground as I moved closer. My boots crunched over gravel, the beam catching little details, the curve of their shoulder, the shine of tears on their cheek. Then it stopped crying. It didn't look up right away. The air seemed to stretch, as if the night was holding its breath with me. And then, slowly, it began to rise, first to its feet, and then taller and taller. The proportions were all wrong. Its arms hung too far down, the head tilted at a strange angle, chin almost touching its chest, as if it didn't want me to see its face. I froze. It moved. Not toward me at first, but sideways, 3 jerky steps, like it couldn't quite figure out how legs worked. Then it pivoted and started in my direction, slow but deliberate. My flashlight beam jittered over its body, revealing more unsettling details. Its knees bent the wrong way, its elbows too sharp under the fabric. The sound it made wasn't footsteps, it was a dry, scraping shuffle, like bone on gravel. I stumbled backward toward my car. My instinct screamed to get inside and drive. "Hey, stay there," I tried, my voice shaking. It didn't stop. By the time I reached my door, it was less than 10 feet away. That's when it finally lifted its head. The face wasn't right. It wasn't even a face, just a smooth, pale surface where features should have been, with faint indentations that might have been eyes or something pretending to have them. My chest tightened, breath turning ragged. I dove into the driver's seat, slammed the lock down, and threw the car into gear. My headlights swept over it one last time, its head twitching as if following the movement, and then it dropped back into that crouched position, like it was waiting for the next person to stop. I didn't slow down again until I hit the intersection with the main road, hands trembling so hard I could barely hold the wheel. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, the shoulder was empty. 2 days later, I drove that road in daylight. At the same spot, I saw something small and pale in the ditch. I slowed, but this time I didn't stop. I kept driving until it vanished in my rear view, and I swear, for just a second, I saw it stand up.
The voice on my CB radio knew my name and told me not to take the next exit. I've been driving long hauls for over 15 years, and I've heard just about everything on a CB radio. Jokes, weather updates, and the occasional late-night weirdo trying to spook drivers. But what happened on I-84 in Oregon back in 2019 still gets under my skin. It was just past 2 a.m., the road ahead empty except for the thin beam of my headlights cutting through a blanket of fog. My CB was on low, a faint crackle filling the cab. I had a thermos of coffee at my side, my window cracked for fresh air, and nothing on my mind except making it to the next rest stop before I started to fade. Then, out of nowhere, the static sharpened. Mike. My hands froze on the wheel. It wasn't just my name. It was my voice, the way it sounded when my wife says it, drawn out, deliberate. Mike, don't take the next exit. I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't spoken to anyone in hours.
The CB channel was one I always kept open, but it was dead quiet all night until that. I scanned the mirrors, no headlights behind me, no oncoming traffic, just that pale fog and empty asphalt. I keyed the mic. "Who is this?" The static hissed for a few seconds before fading. No reply. The next exit was 2 miles ahead. It led to a service road I often used to shave time off my run. The route was quiet, scenic, and I'd taken it more times than I could count. I told myself it was just some bored trucker messing around. But the thing that rattled me wasn't the words, it was the tone. Whoever it was didn't sound like they were pranking me. They sounded afraid. By the time I saw the green exit sign, I'd almost convinced myself to ignore it. I slowed a bit, hand hovering over the turn signal. My mind kept replaying the voice in my head like it was pressing down on me. In the end, stubbornness won. I took the exit. It curved sharply before dropping into a 2-lane road lined with tall pines. My high beam swept across the trees, catching flecks of moisture in the air. I remember thinking how unnervingly still it was. No wind, no night creatures, not even the usual hum of distant traffic. I'd barely gone half a mile before I saw it. The first thing that caught my eye was the glint of shattered glass in my lights. Then, an overturned SUV blocking the entire road. Steam hissed from the crumpled hood. One wheel was still spinning. I slammed on the brakes so hard my coffee went flying. My trailer groaned as it slowed, tires screeching against the pavement. There was no sign of another vehicle, but the skid marks were fresh, just seconds old. I jumped out and ran toward the SUV, my boots crunching over glass. A woman was in the driver's seat, her airbag deployed, eyes wide with shock. She was conscious but frozen in place, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding her together. "I'm calling 911, I told her, already fumbling for my phone. As I gave the dispatcher our location, my eyes flicked back toward the trees. The fog seemed thicker here, curling low along the ground. Somewhere beyond the pines, something moved. I couldn't see clearly, but I felt it, a presence, watching. While we waited for help, the woman finally spoke. Her voice was trembling. "If you hadn't stopped, I think I'd still be here when someone finally came by." I didn't tell her about the voice on my CB. Emergency crews arrived in under 10 minutes, loading her onto a stretcher and flipping her vehicle upright. I stayed back, leaning against my truck, my mind stuck on that warning. When the road was clear, I climbed back into the cab. My CB sat there, silent. I switched channels, scanned frequencies, but it was all static again. About 20 minutes later, curiosity got the better of me. I switched back to the same channel I'd been on earlier. For a moment, there was just that soft hiss. Then, faint, almost swallowed by static. Good choice, Mike. My hair on my arms stood straight up. I flicked the CB off and kept it that way the rest of the drive. I've driven that route dozens of times since then, but I've never taken that exit again. And sometimes when I'm alone on the highway late at night, I can't help but glance at the CB, wondering if the voice will come back. If it does, I'm not so sure I'll ignore it.
From shadowy passengers to voices that seem to know our fate, the road holds more than traffic hazards. If you've had your own chilling encounter while driving alone, share it. Someone might need to hear it.